I've worked as a safety manager, a solicitor, and I've worked on several farms in my life. No two farms are the same, and it's impossible to develop a safety system that will work perfectly for every farming context. There's a bit of difference between a remote cattle station in far north Queensland and a hobby farm in the outer suburbs of Sydney. Safety law, however, is general and applies to everyone running a business, no matter where or what they do. This video will give you a brief overview of these legal requirements and how they apply to farms. So what do you have to do? The first step is to identify hazards and eliminate them. That's what legislation tells you as a farm manager or owner to do. A hazard can be anything that may cause injury or incident. Hazard might be a cow or a horse or a machete or a tractor, quad bike, firearm. Could be the old swimming pool that you never use or an old bit of equipment in the back paddock. Could be anything. No hazard ever exists in a vacuum. Lots of factors contribute to the risk that it poses. Are there children on the farm? Do you employ seasonal workers such as backpackers who might not understand what the piece of equipment might do? Are you in a remote location, far away from phone communication or medical services, so a minor incident might become a major issue? You must think through these things and understand the risks. Your old dam may pose no risk at all to you, but with kids around, it can suddenly be a major problem. The legislation talks about the hierarchy of control. We have to do everything we can to remove or reduce the risk of a hazard causing injury. Eliminate is the best, and it's the obvious one. Get rid of the hazard. That's not always possible though. For example, you cannot remove horses from your farm if you run a horse stud. The next step is to use physical control such as engineering, isolation and substitution. This might mean swapping a quad bike for a side-by-side, putting machinery guarding on a machine so you can't touch a working part, or it might mean installing a pneumatic cattle gate so you won't get kicked as easily. Some risks still remain or can't be physically reduced, so we need to work with livestock, for example. What do we do? And the next step is administrative controls. That involves training, signage, safe work procedures and those things. Helping workers to understand the risks and work as safely as possible. It's very important for new workers on a farm. The final last resort is personal protective equipment. Protect your toes and your eyes and your hands. Wear boots, wear goggles, wear gloves when you're using chemicals. And you can see why it's down the list, because you don't want the issue to happen in the first place. You don't want to be sprayed in the eye with a chemical at all. The courts have been very clear in interpreting how we apply controls. We need to follow what they say. Number one, we have to assume that workers are going to make mistakes and do things inadvertently or stupidly. In Safe Work New South Wales and Activate Fire, a behavioural control had been implemented to control a risk of electric shock. The judge said, not good enough. The judge's words were, the workers were still exposed to the risk if they were careless or inadvertent in carrying out the work, and that is the usual position with systems of work that involve only behavioural controls. They just simply don't stop people doing silly things or making genuine mistakes. In that case, it was just a safe work procedure and daily toolbox meeting to control the risk of an electric shock, when there were physical things available, like turning the power off. It's not enough just to have a procedure. You must expect workers to make mistakes and build things around them to be safe. Yet despite the best intentions and efforts, incidents will still happen. And so there really is another level in the hierarchy, which is incident management. This will involve communication, so you can alert others to your location if you're required, the first aid equipment, so you can manage a snake bite, for example. And if you think about it, a snake is never going to obey a snake's prohibited sign on your farm. You have to be a pretty smart snake, so you're always going to have that risk, and you need to be able to manage it. Behind all of this is the concept of reasonably practicable. The law recognises you cannot eliminate all hazards, but you must take all reasonably practicable steps to eliminate or reduce the risks. And these are the things you have to consider. How serious is the risk? What's going to happen if it occurs? How often are workers exposed to the risk? Is it a freak of nature that'll ever happen, or is it something that we do every day? What are others in the industry doing about it? You can't be the only one still using an old bit of equipment if everyone's upgraded and no one uses the old things anymore. What do our workers want? What can they work with? That's very important too. What can we afford? You're not expected to spend $1 million on something if you can't afford $1 million. What is working? Is it actually working for us? That wonderful, great safety fix means nothing, pointless. Have a look at our website for some worked examples, and we'll give you the address later. Safety legislation places key duties on PCBUs, and that's defined as persons conducting a business or undertaking. Your farm is most likely a PCBU, maybe only when you engage workers. It's important to find that out. It might only be for 2 weeks or 2 months of the year. PCBUs have specific responsibilities. Number one is to consult with workers. What do the workers think's unsafe? How do they think issues can be addressed? And that involves communication. What's dangerous? What do we need to do about it? Identify risks. What are the high risks? You need to know what do you do on your farm that could cause injury. Control the risks. Take those high risks. What are we doing about them? Are we eliminating what we can eliminate? Are we reducing the risk of the things we have to live with? And train people. What do workers need to know to do their job safely? The owners and directors are officers, typically, and officers have specific legal responsibilities. They have to exercise due diligence. Due diligence means knowing what's happening in the workplace, so being aware of what's actually happening on your farm, knowing what's happening in the industry, providing appropriate resources to make the workplace safe, providing mechanisms for reporting and managing incidents and issues, and establishing systems to ensure this all works. And finally, verifying that it's actually working. All the things we've talked about before land on the director or officer's head. The final point to make, reasonable is a complex concept. Reasonable is always in a context. If you're a reasonable person or act reasonably. What did you know? What should you have known? What should you have done? What's your experience taught you? If you've worked on farms all your life, then you should have known something was unsafe. You must take farm safety seriously. The penalties are high. There's a risk of imprisonment for serious safety breaches where negligence is involved. Fines in New South Wales are up to $3 million, more in other states. And prison time, as we said, is a possibility. But that's also not to mention how you're going to feel if one of your workers or family members dies on your farm or is seriously injured. Our safety system has been developed by Primo Moratis Fresh as part of an enforceable undertaking where they've committed to support the farming and agricultural industries. As a result, the system and its supporting documents are free. Our website, and we'll show you a link to it later, has a page dedicated to farm safety, and you can find details of how to download the safety system there and get all the resources you need. Give me a call, send me an email if you need any further information. We look forward to supporting you and your commitment to farm safety. Thank you.